Hello, and welcome to this bonus episode of Stitch Obsessed. So my name is Miriam, if this is the first time you are meeting me, and I talk about all kinds of quilting and sewing related things here on YouTube, but today we are covering a very special topic that is near and dear to my heart. Today, this bonus episode is part of a larger collaboration with several YouTubers here on YouTube to celebrate National Quilting Day. I'm very excited to be a part of this. This is my first collaboration that I've done with other YouTubers. Super honored that I was picked to be part of the collaboration, and I'm just very excited to get into this topic. Down in the description box below, you will find a list of all the other videos that are part of this collaboration, so please go give them a watch, give them a like. You're gonna learn all kinds of cool things in this collaboration, so I am very excited to be a part of it. What am I contributing to this list of tutorials and tips and tricks? Well, a lot of you have found me through my glue basting tutorial, and that is by far my most watched video. For good reason. It's an excellent technique and a lot of people don't know about it. They're skeptical about it, which is totally understandable. You should be skeptical of new things, right? It's a game changer. It really is. And I'm hearing back from so many people saying that I just tried glue basting for the first time and it was awesome. But in this video specifically, I want to go over kind of why it is such a helpful method for basting, and I'm going to do a demo of it using a different fabric than I used last time. Then I'm going to cover kind of the top questions that I get all the time about glue basting and kind of questions that really, they need to be answered, right? So instead of answering them one by one in the comments, I'm gonna just answer them in this video, and hopefully it clears any questions up that you may have. So let's jump right into the talk of today. The glue that I'm talking about, and the only glue that I recommend for glue basting, is Elmer's school glue. That's right. The glue that we used in school that we would cover our hand in and let it dry and then peel it off just because, you know, that's just so fun to do. This can be used with all kinds of things in quilting, but today we're just going to be talking about glue basting, specifically basting your quilt sandwich. Why do I use glue for basting instead of pins or stitches or basting spray or fusible batting? Why do I use it? Well, first, it's a lot cheaper than those other options. Spray based is quite expensive, even if you get it on sale. It is significantly more expensive than school glue. I mean, this is just a couple of dollars at Walmart or Target or wherever you shop, Amazon. Yeah, it's just, it's a lot less expensive. Also, the fusible batting, I know that's expensive. I've never tried that, so I can't speak to how well that works. I would assume it would work well because I've used other fusible products like interfacing and things, and that does work really well because you set it with heat. But I've just never used it, so I can't speak to how well it works. But it is expensive, and it's just an extra step with the iron, and I just personally do not like ironing or pressing or whatever you want to call it. It's not my favorite step. So that's one reason why I use Elmer's school glue for basting. It's inexpensive. Another big reason for me personally is it is non-toxic and it doesn't reek. It doesn't have fumes. It doesn't give me a headache or a migraine, and it doesn't feel like my lungs are coated in it after I've used it. That was a big reason why I stopped using spray basting. I used that for maybe 2 quilts, and then that was it. I was done. I had done one, and I did it I was outside, okay? I had my table, my folding table set up outside, and I sprayed with it, and I still got a headache, and it was noxious. It was just this, I don't know if I'm just hypersensitive to the fumes of that stuff or what, but I did not like it at all. The second quilt that I attempted, I actually had to have someone else come in and finish it for me because I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm just getting a headache. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. This is gross. Yeah, so that's another reason. This is non-toxic. I mean, you could, well, you shouldn't eat it, but you know, kids do. And it's not going to make you sick. So that's another reason why I love this. And it's water soluble, and it's such a great product. To me, it is very safe to use. Also, it's a lot less messy with, again, with spray basting. I know I'm kind of going after spray basting, but this is probably the best alternative to spray basting. Spray basting is very messy. Even if you're careful, everything gets sticky, and it's just a mess. I'm just not a fan of that stuff. If you're spraying on a table, it gets your table sticky, it gets your floors sticky. Oh, what a nightmare. I'm not a fan. So this does not. If you were to get this on your table, it is so easy to wipe off. You just get a wet washcloth with kind of warm water, and you just let it sit on the glue until it kind of softens, and then you just wipe it away, and then it's gone, it's done. It's not a hassle anymore. So it's very washable, cleanable off of surfaces and things. If you get it on your clothes, it's not going to destroy your clothes. It's just, it's really great, and I love it. That's another reason why I love it. So it's inexpensive, it is non-toxic, it's not stinky, and it is not messy. Unless you want to be messy, then I guess you could get a little messy with it. But it's not a messy product, and it works really well for glue basting. So let me go over some of the different techniques that I have tried with glue basting. So there are lots of ways that I have experimented on how to use glue basting the best way for me personally. So when I first started using it, I actually would take the glue and add it to a spray bottle like this one. This is just a Best Press spray bottle, but I had an extra spray bottle like that, and I added the Elmer's school glue and then hot water, and then I shook it up and mixed it, and then I used that kind of as a spray glue. It worked, but there was a couple of reasons why I stopped using it in that way. So the first one is it gets the quilt very wet, so it takes a long time to dry. I'm not a big fan of waiting for it to dry. There's that. The glue, obviously you're adding water to it, so it dilutes the stickiness. So it was way less sticky. The layers, you could kind of easily pull them apart, and I didn't want that because I machine quilt with my domestic sewing machine. So I'm moving the quilt around with my hands and stuff, and I don't want the quilt to be shifting under my hands as I'm moving it, right? That's less than ideal, right? I stopped doing that. Then I tried doing a method where I would just squirt a whole bunch of glue out onto like a paper plate, and then I had one of those sponge brushes, and I would dip the glue or the brush into the glue and then just kind of try to paint it on. So when you try to do that with batting, it does get a little sticky, a little messy, and it's a little frustrating, honestly, to try to like brush it on because the little fibers of the batting want to come up off of the batting sheet, and it's a mess. And you could brush it onto the fabric and then stick it. Yeah, that was just, again, it was just extra steps and kind of extra materials that I needed, like the little brushes. And then the little brushes, it seemed like no matter how long I rinsed it under the water, it would still get hard and crack after it dried. So I was going through sponge brushes every time I did my basting, and it just wasn't for me. Some people like to do it that way, and that's totally fine. And that is great. You do what you like to do, right? My final way that I tried, and the way that I use now, and I have used it this way for years now, is I just use it straight out of the bottle. It's got a handy dandy little nozzle here, and it shoots out a nice little stream of glue, and that works perfect for what I'm using it for. So I'm gonna do a demo of how I do it. We are going to be basting a baby quilt that I made. I actually made this quilt top several years ago. I know you guys understand you can make a quilt top and then you never finish it. But I made this quilt top for a tutorial for one of the blogs that I was writing for at the time. And I just never finished it because I was just making a simple baby quilt for a tutorial and then that was it. So I'm going to show you with that. So the top is made from quilting cotton and the back I decided to use flannel because I get a lot of questions on if it works with flannel, and it does. It works with pretty much any fabric. It will stick to the little fibers. So what happens when you are glue basting is you put a very thin stream of glue on. I apply it to the batting and then I smooth out the fabric over the batting. And what happens is when you are smoothing out the fabric, it's kind of squishing the glue and having it expand, go into the fibers of the batting and also the fibers of the quilt top or the quilt back. And then that glue is bonding those two things together and kind of being like a little connection between those two. So that's what's happening. I will show you how I do that in my little demo here. Let's move out over to my dining room table, which is where I do my glue basting because it's a nice big table, and we will see how easy glue basting is. Okay, we are at my dining room table and I have everything that I need to glue baste. So I have my little quilt top here. So it's just very simple patchwork quilt top. I have my flannel fabric for my backing, which is a really pretty kind of celestial looking fabric. Is flannel. Then I have my favorite batting, which is a Pellon natural cotton batting. I really love this and I'm just using the crib size since this is just a baby size quilt. And then of course our Elmer's school glue, and that's all you need for this method. First I'm gonna open up my batting. Pellon is my favorite. It's just always consistent and I like the feel of it. Quilts really well and I just really like this quilt batting. I will link Pellon down in the description box below. I actually have an Amazon storefront. If you click on the link for that, it will bring you and show you all of the quilting accessories and tools and notions and everything that I like to use that I find on Amazon. And it's in one easy place for you to find. So if you want to check that out, you can. First, I am going to glue my batting and my back together. And that's just the order that I do it in. You do not have to do it in that order if you don't want to. If you'd rather do your quilt top first, you can. But this is just the order I've always done it in. I'm just going to lay my batting out first. And then I'm gonna grab my backing. And this is the way that I like to do it. So I put the two layers together without any glue, just to make sure that everything's gonna fit properly and it's gonna lay nice and smooth together. Just lay it out like that. You are definitely gonna see cats in this video. My cats really like to help during this step of the quilt making process. They just like to smooth everything out first. Because this makes the basting process a little bit easier once everything's smoothed out first. So what I like to say is your basting technique is as good as your pressing. So what I mean by that is you want to make sure that your back and your quilt top and your batting are all pressed really well. You don't want any sharp creases in any of the fabric or wrinkles, because that can then turn into a pucker when you are quilting, and that is so frustrating when you get done quilting and then you realize, oh no, there was a big crease and it caused a pucker all the way up the back of the quilt or the front if you don't notice that. I really want to stress that I know it takes a little extra time, but go ahead, run your iron over all of those wrinkles, get it nice and flat and crisp, and then the basting will be much easier to do. Now that I have these smoothed out, I just fold up the fabric halfway. And I do this method with all sizes of quilts, whether it's a baby quilt or like a little small wall hanging or a king size quilt. So I fold the fabric up halfway and I get my glue, and I'm gonna try to zoom this in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. I take the glue, shake some down to the end, and then I just gently, if it's gonna let me squeeze it out. Just a nice thin line. You do not need a lot of glue to do this because the glue is quite sticky. And it's just like icing a toaster strudel, right? So you're just going to squeeze the glue out just like that and do a very thin line. And I'm having my glue lines be about 4 inches apart. It's not an exact science, but here, let me pull this out so you can see. And then we just keep on going. Just like that until you reach where you want to stop. And I don't know if you can see, let me move this back here. But see, I kind of got a big glob right there. So what I do is I just take the tip of my bottle and I just kind of smooth that out a little bit, because you don't want big globs when you are glue basting, because especially if you are hand quilting, that glob will get hard as it dries, and then it's super hard to push your needle through that. So a sewing machine would probably deal with it fine, but hand quilting is a completely different story. So I recommend, if you're gonna hand quilt and use Elmer's glue, I would say to mix a little water in with your glue so it's a little thinner, and then just really make sure that there's no globs, and then you should be okay. And we'll talk more about that later on in the question section of this video. So now that I have half of the glue done, now I am going to smooth it out. I take the backing and I just gently lay it down. You just want to make sure that you are not stretching it as you're smoothing it out. And then what I do is I kind of place a hand in the center, and then I just move my other hand out. And you're just smoothing it out. And as you're smoothing it, that glue is getting smushed down into the batting. Just use your hands. Some people like to use a ruler. So like a long ruler, and they kind of glide the edge over it. That works too. But I just like to use my hands, because then I can feel the batting underneath and make sure that I don't feel any lumps or bumps in the batting. So that's going to avoid any puckering. And then we do the same on the other side. Just smooth it out with your hand. And if you do feel a little bit of a pucker in the batting, you can just kind of hold your hand up above the pucker. Here, I'll do it with this hand. Hold the hand above the like a little roll or something in the batting, and then just kind of gently give the batting a little tug. You don't want to stretch it out, but you're just giving it a little tug and then releasing. And then that kind of pulls that roll out, and then you can smooth the fabric over it. And then I just kind of go over it with my hands just to make sure all of that glue is squished down. That is that half. Now I'll go over and do the other half. I'm gonna actually rotate this so it's a little easier for me to reach. So we fold over the fabric. I'm gonna try to do this with my right hand so you can see it a little easier. So I'm just gonna squeeze out the glue in a nice even line. keeping about 4 inches between the lines. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just like that. And see, I got a couple little globs here. Oh, you can't really see it. So I'm just going to take the tip again and just kind of smooth those out, drawing the glue across. So we've got a line of glue there. Now we do the same thing with smoothing the fabric over the glue, making sure we're not stretching. You don't want to stretch the fabric. You're just smoothing it out. And you can use this method with all kinds of fabrics. You can use flannel, you could use fleece, you can use quilting cotton. Really, you can use any fabric that you would use to make a quilt. You can use minky. I've had lots of people ask about if this works with minky. It does. Just again, be really careful that when you are smoothing it out that you're not stretching it, especially those minkies that have those little dots on them, you know, the little raised dots, because you don't want those to get all stretched out and wonky for the quilting. Smooth it out without stretching it. And I have personally used minky for a backing while I'm gluing, and it works very well with that. Also, I get lots of questions on what kind of batting you can use this with. Does it only work with cotton batting? And no, it does not. It works with polyester. It works with wool. I have done one quilt using wool batting. It worked with that. It worked very well. You just need a little extra glue with wool or polyester because they're thicker. So the glue soaks into the batting a little bit more. So just keep that in mind. You might need to use a little bit more than what you saw me using. But again, you just keep those lines about 4 inches apart all the way across and it works perfect. Just think about if you were using pins to pin baste, how far apart would you have your pins? That's just a good guide of how far apart you want to place your glue. My kitten is getting curious. Come here. You want to come over here? Are you going to be shy? She's just going to lay down over there. That's okay. Now that we have the glue placed on the quilt, then we just let it dry. And it dries in about 30 minutes. You do not have to leave it overnight to dry. You do not have to set it with an iron. I've heard some people say that you have to set it with an iron. You do not. It dries all on its own. That's what it's supposed to do. And so yeah, it takes about 30 minutes, up to an hour maybe if you have a more humid home. So just keep that in mind. So I am just going to let this sit here and I will meet you back here in about 30 minutes and we will baste the quilt top next. All right? The girls are inspecting to make sure I did this correctly. Right? Well, the glue is dry. So to tell if the glue is dry is I just come up to a corner here and I just give it a little tug. And if it looks like it's sticking, then that means it's dry. So now we're going to put the quilt top on to our little quilt sandwich. So what we do is we just flip this over and there we have our batting ready for the quilt top. And now Sassy's gonna be wild. She is a kitten. Okay. I'm just gonna lay this out here, just like we did with the backing fabric. You think I'm playing with you, huh? Wild kitty? Ouch. All right, so that's how our quilt is gonna lay on the batting. So now we do the exact same thing as we did with the... All right, let go. Come on. So now we do the exact same thing as we did with the backing. So I'm gonna fold up half of our little quilt top here. Oh goodness. I'm gonna have to go to your room for a minute. She needed a little timeout. So I just fold it back and then we take our glue bottle and again, squeeze the glue out. Now, if you ever find that your glue bottle tip, you're having a hard time squeezing the glue out of the bottle, that probably means that the tip is clogged with dry glue. What you can do is you just take it over to your sink and run the water. And what I do is I just take the lid off and whoops, leave it open, like leave the little twist of the lid. See, that's closed. I open it and then I just put it like that and have my sink pour water into the nozzle, and you'll see glue kind of dripping out. I'll just hold it under there for a minute and a half, and that kind of clears out the glue from in there. And then what you can do is you can just blow into the little hole with your mouth, and that gets the rest of the glue out, and that seems to work. You could also, after you're done putting glue down, you could just run that under the water real quick to rinse it out. That's another way that you could do that so it doesn't get clogged. That's just an extra little tip. There we have the glue is on. Man, I almost wish the glue and the batting were not such a close color, because it is kind of difficult to see. If you look very closely, there's the little lines of glue. So I'm just gonna take my quilt top, and while you are smoothing out a quilt top, you wanna make sure that you are smoothing out the seams in the way that you want them to be laid, right? So there I'm just again smoothing it out nice and slow, but I am not pulling on the fabric because we do not want any stretch. Especially if you're working with a quilt top that has a lot of seams, you don't want to stretch out any seams while you're smoothing it out, because the glue holds it. It holds it very well. So there I have that half smoothed out. Very beautiful. It's all smooth. And I'm actually going to be using this quilt sandwich for a fun quilting tutorial later on. So if you want some fun quilting tutorials that you can do with your domestic sewing machine, subscribe to my channel, because I really like to teach those types of tutorials and techniques, because I think it's very fun to quilt your own quilt. There's no shame, of course, in sending your quilt off to a long arm quilter, but I just think it's extra fun to be able to do the entire quilt making process on your own. So now I'm just going to repeat that process and get my glue here. I've had lots of people ask if they can use like a glue stick for this, and I cannot say yay or nay to that question because I have not tried it yet. I'm planning on doing a little experiment where I'm gonna get a bunch of different kinds of glues and test them out and see what works and what doesn't. So I can't say for sure if that would work. I know it would stick, but I don't know how easily that would wash out. The Elmer's School Glue, the white glue that comes in a little bottle, is all that I've ever used. So that's what I can tell you works. So I'm getting this nice and smooth, and you want your quilt top to be as flat and as smooth as possible. So then when you go to quilt it, it'll be much easier to quilt, right? Smush it just to smush any of that glue down that needs to be smushed. And there we have it. That is how you glue baste. So I'm just gonna, again, let this sit for about a half an hour. The glue will dry and then it will be ready to quilt. With this method, let me point the camera up here so you can see me. So with this method, you can put glue on the quilt and you can leave it for months, probably even years, and then you can come back and it'll be basted perfectly and ready to go. The quilt that I basted for my original quilt basting video is right behind me. And I actually have not quilted this yet. I'm saving it for a tutorial and I just haven't done it yet. But this is the original quilt that I basted, and it is still glued. It is still, see, the layers are still stuck together and it's still beautiful and perfect. There's no staining. The glue does not stain, and it is still ready for me to quilt whenever I decide to quilt it. That's something to keep in mind. So it's not time sensitive. It's not like, well, if you do use glue basting, you need to quilt it within 2 weeks or all that work will be for naught. It's not like that. So that's something to keep in mind also. Now that we've gotten the demo done, let's go back to my sewing room and we're gonna cover some of those frequently asked questions that I get all the time in the comments section about glue basting, and then we will be wrapping up this video. All right, so let's go talk about it. All right, we're back in my sewing space and let's just jump right into these questions. So these are the top 5 questions that I get all the time about glue basting. So number 1 is, and you're gonna see me look over here because I have them written down. I wanna make sure that I remember them correctly. Does it gum up the needle or mechanics of your machine at all? No, it does not. I have never had any issues with that. It's an extremely gentle glue. It's not sticky once it dries. It dries dry. Yeah, it does not gum up the needle at all. I have not had any issues with the needle going through it. Like I said before, if you're hand quilting, you might want to dilute it a little bit, but I'm going to cover that in a couple questions. I just have never had issues with it messing with my machine at all. And I've used glue basting with my Juki TL 2010Q, which is a semi-industrial machine, but it's still a domestic machine, but it's just a little bit more powerful than a regular domestic. But I've also used it with my Singer patchwork quilting machine, which is, you know, just a regular Singer domestic sewing machine. And I never had any issues with that. You can rest assured that it's not going to gum up your needle. It's not going to gum up the thread or make it icky or sticky or anything like that. So as long as you're not quilting before it dries, if you quilt it before it dries, then it will be wet, but it won't be sticky, if that makes sense. So just let it dry. It takes tops maybe an hour for the glue to dry. So no, it does not gum up the needle. Next question. Do you have to set it with heat? I did already talk about this, but no, you do not. The only reason that I would see where it would be beneficial to use heat is if you wanted to dry it faster, which I think a half an hour to an hour is fast enough. But if you want it to dry faster, then using heat, no steam, would probably dry it faster. But I just don't see the need in it, and that's just an extra step. So no, you do not need to set it with heat. I literally have never done that, and my quilts turn out great, and the glue dries fine. That's my experience. If you have a differing opinion, that's okay. We're allowed to have different opinions, right? Next, does it wash out? Yes, it does. I wash all of my quilts in my home washing machine, and I wash them either normal setting or a bulky setting, depending on the size of the quilt. If it's a larger quilt, then I'll do bulky, but if it's like a smaller throw or smaller, then I'll just do the normal setting. Yeah, and I always wash my quilts with cold water, and I use a very gentle detergent. I don't use anything with no bleach or anything. I have very sensitive skin, so I can't use the yummy smelling detergents, so I use a very, very gentle detergent anyways. So that's just what I use for my quilts, and that washes the glue out fine. I've had no issues with that. My washing machine is totally fine. I've washed lots of quilts in there. Also, I have taken quilts, if the quilt is too big to fit in my washing machine, then I'll take it to the laundromat and wash my quilts at the laundromat. So if you're making like a large king size quilt and you're like, well, where am I gonna wash it? A laundromat's a great place to wash it. And those work fine. And I always do a gentle setting on cold with my gentle detergent. So the detergent that I specifically use is the brand All, and I think it's called Gentle and Clear. But yeah, that's just what I found works for me and my sensitive skin. And yeah, it works great for washing out the glue from your quilts as well. So I've had no issues with that. It washes out on the first wash. I've just never had any issues with it. So yes, it does wash out. Question number 4, can you hand quilt when using glue basting? And yes, you can. But like I said before, I would recommend to dilute it. I'm planning on taking a deep dive into hand quilting just because it is a technique that I have wanted to learn for years, and I've actually tried it a little bit recently, which has been really, really fun. When I am planning on hand quilting an entire quilt, and when I do that, I will be using the glue basting, but I probably will dilute it a little bit and then just use it and make sure it's really smushed. There are no globs and everything. So yes, you can. Just make sure that there aren't any globs, because that's going to be hard for you to push your needle through. It won't be impossible if you're using a thimble. It will be harder to push a needle through one of those big globs. So just be aware of that when you are hand quilting, okay? So yeah, I'll probably dilute it, maybe just like a 10% water, just to make it a little bit thinner, but I still want it to be nice and sticky and the glue actually hold the layers together well. So that's probably what I will do, and that's what I would recommend. You can use it with hand quilting. Very cool. So last question, does it stain? I have never had that happen. I think I had one person tell me that they had a little bit of, like, you could see it through like a light colored fabric, but I don't know if I would necessarily call it staining, or if that's just, you know, you're just seeing the white glue, because it dries white. It doesn't dry clear. That's something to keep in mind. So if you're going to be using something that has like a white background or something, you're probably going to have to wash it out. If you were to do like a wall hanging, like my sew wall hanging back here, you wouldn't necessarily have to wash it out unless you wanted to, because, you know, you're not using it, so you're not going to feel the glue. But I have heard some people say that depending on what area you live in, the glue can attract some bugs. So if that's something you're concerned about, or you know goes on where you live, you should probably wash out the glue. But as far as staining goes, I have not experienced any staining. Like I said, that quilt that I basted like 4 or 5 months ago, there's no staining. You can't, it looks like it did the day that I glued it. So I have never experienced any staining with the glue. So I hope that clears up kind of the most common questions that I get when it comes to glue basting. If you would like to see more glue basting content, I did shoot that video about 5 months ago now on glue basting a large quilt. I do believe it's a queen sized quilt. So I show you how I do that from start to finish. And then I also did a follow-up video answering just a bunch of questions. So a lot more questions that I got right after that video. So I did an entire video just answering all those questions to kind of help everybody out. So I will link those in the description box below. Don't forget to check out all the other collaboration videos that are linked down below as well. I really hope you guys enjoy this collaboration day. I hope you have a wonderful National Quilting Day. Make something, even if it's something small, even if you just get a little bit done today on something that you're working on. Just have fun with it, and just thank you so much for watching this video. It was so much fun showing you guys how to glue baste. It's really become something that I'm very passionate about, if you couldn't tell. And I just have a lot of fun sharing it. Just have a great rest of your day, guys, and I will see you soon. All right? Bye. Oh, hey. We're gonna cut that out, guys. Come on.
Hey, no being cranky. Stop that.